1 or 2 more weeks to finish out our series about Abram, who will become Abraham, as a lot of us know. There'll be some verses up on the screen for you to follow along. We're going to cover chapter 15 and 16 kind of rapidly today in a topic that a lot of us deal with. It's dealing with doubt. Up to this point, in Genesis 11 and 12, Abram had, got called out of the comfort zone, and he took that hardest step, that step of faith, and followed God. And then when he got to where God called him to be, he encountered difficulties, and he had a choice to make. Remain where he was in Canaan, where God had told him to go, or relocate in Egypt. We know that he made some bad choices, but we learned in that God is faithful. Even whenever we mess up, that when we mess up, God doesn't. That was the point behind that. And in chapter 14, you see that Abram recovered from that, and he demonstrated some great faith. But like us, we're going to see that he is struggling with doubt in this chapter. And ultimately, the goal is to get a place in the New Testament where Abram was talking about, or where Paul talked about Abraham being a man who didn't waver in his faith. That ultimately is what I hope and pray for each of us, that through it all, no matter what's going on, we can be people of faith that do not waver, but then realize that it's a growth process and that it's okay to mess up sometimes. It's okay, especially in the initial stages of our faith, we're going to experience fear until we get to a place to where our faith, like a muscle, is developed as large as it can be. And sometimes silence, inactivity seems to plant seeds of doubt, and that's kind of where Abram was. We're going to pick up today in chapter 15 and 16 and talk about dealing with doubt. Let me read you a story. You're going to have to kind of think toward the end and picture this to get it. I'll give you a second. In dealing with doubt, look at the power of doubt. I'm going to read a short story. The defendant was on trial for murder. There is strong evidence indicating guilt, but there is no corpse. In the defense's closing statement, the lawyer, knowing his client probably would be convicted, resorted to a trick. Ladies and gentlemen of the jury, I have a surprise for you all, the lawyer said as he looked at his watch. Within 1 minute, the person presumed dead in this case will walk into this courtroom. He looked toward the courtroom door. The jurors, somewhat stunned, all looked on eagerly. A minute passed, and nothing happened. Finally, the lawyer said, actually, I made up the previous statement, but you all looked on with anticipation. Therefore, I put to you that you have to have a reasonable doubt in this case as to whether anyone was killed, and insist that you return a verdict of not guilty. The jury, clearly confused, retired to deliberate. A few minutes later, the jury returned and pronounced a verdict of guilty. But how? Inquired the lawyer. You must have had some doubt. I saw you all stare at the door. The jury foreman replied, oh, we looked, but your client didn't. Think about it for a minute. Doubt is a powerful thing. Doubt is something that the devil will use. He'll try to plant those same seeds of doubt within us by playing little tricks the way that this lawyer did. And it often will cause us to think about things that rob our peace and prevent us from stepping out and taking those large steps of faith the way that Abram did. Ultimately, what it boils down to is it can be very difficult to maintain patience in the wake of disappointed expectation. And that's kind of where Abram was right here, and that's what we're going to talk about today. Inaction, and that's what Abram and Sarai kind of sensed from God or felt from God, or what they thought was that. Inaction, where the real or perceived can erode that trust and confidence, and that's where we pick up the story. Bottom line, this is what it boils down to. Waiting on God is sometimes hard, and delays can cause doubt to kick in. Waiting on God is hard and can cause doubt. Check out this video. Now we play the video to illustrate the point. Waiting on God is hard and can lead to doubt.
Okay, sit in that chair. Alright, here's the deal. Marshmallow, for you. You can either wait, and I'll give you another one if you wait, or you can eat it now. When I come back, I'll give you another one, so then you'll have to. But stay in here and stay in the chair till I come back, okay? All right. I'm gonna go do something and then I'll come back.
It smells yummy. It smells really good.
It's up to you. You can have it now or you can wait. Okay? I'll be back. Stay in the chair, okay? Okay. Alright, so I'm going to leave and then I'll come back, okay? So you can either eat it right now or you can wait. Either way, okay? Okay. How'd you do? Did you do good? You did? You wanted to eat it, didn't you? Yeah. So if they give you another one? Okay, now you have both. You need them.
You ever feel like that when you're waiting on God? You know, we wait on Him to restore relationships, we wait on Him to restore, marriages, to fix something, we wait on Him to, bring the breakthrough. We're like them kids in there just salivating over that marshmallow, and yet it's hard. That inactivity, when that lady was not coming back, them kids were getting impatient, like, where is she, Is she really going to come back? It's real easy to start doubting and start wondering if the person is going to do what they said they were going to do. And that's where we are. Remember, inaction, whether real or perceived, can erode patience and trust. And that's where we pick up our story with Abram, who is going to become Abraham eventually. I keep saying that because I sometimes mess up and interchange the names to say that to prevent confusion. But if you will, read with me in Genesis chapter 15, verses 1 through 8. It'll be up on the screen. Abram was at a place where he's waiting. It had become hard. There was delay. It was hard for him to maintain his patience in the midst of that disappointed expectation. And we pick up the story here in Genesis chapter 15, verse 1. Sometime later, the Lord spoke to Abram in a vision and said to him, "Do not be afraid, Abram, for I will protect you, and your reward will be great." You get 2 marshmallows instead of 1 marshmallow. Your reward will be great. That's what is awesome about waiting on God, is that He promises that the reward will be great, but it's hard sometimes to wait. It's tough. I messed up before. I crammed the marshmallows in my mouth way before I was supposed to, because waiting is hard. But it is something that God develops within us, and it is worth the wait, because your reward will be great, is what God told Abram. Verse 2. But Abram replied, "O sovereign Lord, what good are all the blessings when I don't even have a son? Since you've given me no children, Eliezer of Damascus, a servant in my household, will inherit all my wealth. You've given me no descendants of my own, so no one of my servants will, or so now one of my servants will be my heir. Then the Lord said to him, no, your servant will not be your heir, for you will have a son of your own who will be your heir. Then the Lord took Abram outside and said to him, look up into the sky and count the stars if you can. That's how many descendants you will have. And Abram believed the Lord, and the Lord counted him righteous because of his faith. Verse 7, and the Lord told him, I am the Lord who brought you out of Ur of Chaldeans to give you this land as your possession. And watch what happens. Abram's, up and down. He's battled a little bit. But Abram said, oh, sovereign Lord, how can I be sure that I will actually possess it? From this point, for time's sake, I'm just going to tell you what happened a little bit. God confirmed the covenant. I'm not going to spend a lot of time here because we actually talked about this a few weeks ago. Ultimately, God made a promise to Abram, and he made a covenant. And back in those days, those covenants were very serious. They would take it, weird as it may sound, they would cut these animals in half, and they would pass through them. And basically, they said, if I don't keep my promise, may it be to me as it is to these animals. And Abram didn't go through. God went through for both of them. God was basically saying, look, may it be, for me as it is for these animals. If I don't keep my word, it may be for me as it is for these animals. Even if you don't keep your word, God took the whole responsibility of the covenant promise upon himself. God gave him that promise. He gave him that word and that covenant that he just could not break. He told him, great will be your reward. You're going to have a son. You're going to have an heir of your own. You're going to have so many descendants that you're not even going to be able to count them. They'll be as numerous as the stars in the sky. And we see Abram there struggling after a while. If we fast forward to verse 16, and see, that's the thing about it. A lot of times we believe God and we trust God. We believe God for big things, but sometimes there's that one thing that we struggle to trust Him with. We struggle just to completely let it go and say, God, I trust you. I'm going to wait. And that's where they were. So in verse 16, if you will fast forward with me there and read this, they start trying to work things out on their own. Some time has passed by. A lot of time has passed by since the initial promise of the blessing and the promise of the heir. And so, they probably get antsy a little bit, the same way we do. We wait for so long on God, and inactivity starts eroding our trust and our confidence in the vision and in the future and in God. And that's where Abram and Sarai were, because a lot of time had elapsed. And so they start trying to figure things out and work things out. Chapter 16, verse 1. Now Sarai, Abram's wife, had not been able to bear children for him, but she had an Egyptian servant named Hagar. So Sarai said to Abram, the Lord has prevented me from having children. Go and sleep with my servant. Perhaps I can have children through her. Now, back then, during that culture, as weird as it seems right now, that was not all that uncommon. But if you will notice, Abram never once, look at this next verse, so Sarai, Abram's wife, took Hagar, the Egyptian servant, and gave her to Abram as a wife. And verse 4, so Abram had sexual relation with Hagar, and she became pregnant. Now, if you'll notice here, Abram never resisted. He never said, well, I better pray about this first. That might not be a good idea. Maybe that's not the way that God intends for it to be. He didn't hesitate one bit to jump into bed with Hagar. Now, I would hope that if Randy were to tell me to go do something like that, there'd be some hesitancy or something. There'd be something that would cause, because there's no telling what she would think. What if she didn't, or what if I didn't resist? How would that make her feel, And you got to think about Sarai here too. All of a sudden, here she is, trying to work this thing out on her own, taking matters in her own hands. She's short-stepped God's plan, and sent her husband to be with another woman, and this lady becomes pregnant, which reveals that it's Sarah in this situation. So what does she do? Now they're in a mess, and that's what happens whenever we don't wait, whenever we engulf the marshmallows before the promiser comes back and fulfills their word. We take matters in our own hands and we make a mess, and that's ultimately what happens here. We become vulnerable whenever we're waiting for God, and we're longing for that prayer to be answered. We're longing for that relationship to be restored. We're longing for that breakthrough we become vulnerable, we can compromise, we start listening to unwise counsel the way that Abram did, and before you know it, we can wind up in a mess. But the thing about it, when we short-step God's plan, there's always consequences as a result. And sadly, look what happens in verse 5, or the latter part of verse 4. But when Hagar knew she was pregnant, she began to treat Sarai with contempt. Then Sarai said to Abram, "This is all your fault." See, he should have said, "No, it's not a good idea, wife. You're hot, she's not. Let's not go that route." But now, as a result, look, there's trouble in the house. This is your fault, Abram. It's your fault. You're the one. You're to blame. I put my servant in your arms. Now she's pregnant. She treats me with contempt. The Lord will show you who's wrong, you or me. Abram replied, "Look, she's your servant, so deal with her as you see fit." And Sarai treated Hagar harshly, and she finally ran away. Today, as we speak, we still have problems because of this decision. All the descendants of that son birthed through Hagar and Isaac are all of those crazy lunatics in the Middle East who are blowing people up, and those are the people that we're content with now. Those are the descendants of this particular moment of sidestepping God's plan. There's consequences whenever we stop waiting. Like, I know it's hard. I'm not sitting there trying to rebuke anybody for doubting or for struggling or for not wanting to wait. It's tough. And one thing that I do hope when all is said and done is to realize that God's timing is perfect and we can trust His sovereign plan. That's where Abram and Sarai were. They made a mess. Look, at the end of the day, waiting and doing it God's way is so much better than doing it our way. It's so much better than taking matters in our own hands and making a mess of things. I've done that. I've been in places like Abram and Sarai where I was very vulnerable. Self-esteem was low, and went through a lot of things, and opportunity come along, and instead of waiting on God and instead of trusting Him, I dove in a situation, and as a result, wasted several years and hurt a lot of people and things like that. And so, to be honest with you, I like to say, well, it's before I was a Christian, but it was after being a Christian. So, it's not the end of the world to mess up, but I sure would go back and fix some things and not take myself through those consequences or others as well. Waiting on God, I'm telling you from personal experience, it is so much better. As a matter of fact, whenever I talk to people, I'm completely honest with them, because what it boils down to is this. Before Christ, I was very, very undesirable, very mean, very self-centered, got saved, started ministry, and went through some really, really dark times during that time, made some mistakes I'm ashamed of. And, as a result, though, I learned about God's grace, and I learned the difference it is in waiting, and your reward will be great, and waiting on God to do things His way. I often tell people that this church and the family that I have is a product of God's grace. None of my own favor, none of my own works that could have earned it or anything like that. What I learned through my dark times is this. I remember wanting to get ahead of God. I remember, being divorced, lonely, frustrated, and I remember saying, "Lord, I've taken matters in my own hands before and made total messes of situations because I didn't listen to you. This time I'm going to wait." And you know what? I waited on God, and God brought me. One of the best ministry partners, the best, best spouse that a person could ask for. Waiting on God is so much better than taking matters in your own hands. That's where Abram and Sarai was, and that's where we wind up ourselves sometimes. It's so easy to start doubting and start, even justifying and spiritualizing the decisions we made, kind of like Abram and Sarai had made there. But they found out, this is what's so awesome about God though, they found some stuff out about God. They had messed up, think about it, up to this point, Abram messed up big. He let fear override his faith a couple chapters ago. Told a bunch of lies, basically prostituted his wife if they consummated the marriage back in Egypt with Pharaoh and Sarai, that part of the story. But yet God brought him out of that because of who God is, not because of what Abraham done or what he had earned. Abram done messed up again, and as we'll read along, God still is going to bring his promise to pass. It's not dependent upon their behavior. Now, there are consequences because of the mistakes they made. God didn't shield them, and thank God he didn't, because we didn't tell them what would happen if there wasn't any consequences that we suffered. But because God is so awesome and so faithful and so reliable and so full of grace, Scott messed up, Abram messed up, maybe some of you have messed up in the past, God still loves you and still will provide his best. He will do what he promised regardless of what you've done. Because the thing about it is that Abram, it wasn't just an outright disregard of God and his word and just iniquity, which is knowing what to do and not doing it, knowing what to do right and doing wrong. Abram, he was in struggle just like we were, and God still brought his promise to pass, as we'll see, and he still came through, because remember, he made that covenant. If it don't come to pass, may it be for me. You're talking about the God of the universe, the way it is these animals that are cut in half and blood's spilled out on the ground. They learn that God is awesome, that he is faithful, that he is capable. They learn that with God nothing is impossible, even in spite of their own failures and shortcomings. I want to quote another pastor to get ready to close. It can be difficult for us to wait on God, yet in his grace, he understands our limitations and is patient with us. Thank God for that. Man, I am so glad God understands my limitations, because I definitely have. So aren't you glad that God understands your limitations and he is patient with you? He's not up there just waiting on a lightning bolt, ready to throw it down at you, or ready to beat you with a wooden staff or something. He understands our limitations, is patient with us. And finish the quote. Even when we sense delay and attempt to speed up God's plan, he sovereignly brings about his promises according to his perfect timing. Man, thank God for that. I don't know what you're waiting on. I don't know what maybe somebody you love is waiting on, but I do know this. I want to share this with you. It is worth the wait. Great is your reward. What God offers is much better than what you can produce out of your own efforts and works. His timing is perfect. Don't give up on God. Sometimes we don't know why he delays, but we know, while we're waiting. But as we go to the other side, we see that he is sovereign and is in control. And he knows and does what is best. Ultimately, the enemy of our soul wants us to lose hope in him and lose confidence in the future. Emily Dickinson was a poet, wrote a really amazing poem, just had to analyze her recently for composition class. But in it, there's a topic that I really I embrace a lot and I love. It's about hope. In the first line, the first stanza, the first 4 lines, she says, hope is the thing with feathers that perches within the soul. It sings a tune without words and never stops at all. I think about how awesome that imagery is. It's like she's saying that hope is a thing with feathers. It sings a tune and never stops at all. What she did there was very brilliant. She captured the dual nature of hope whenever you picture a bird. A bird is resilient, but it's also fragile. And that's the way our hopes are. And our hopes can be very resilient. Hope is a motivator. It causes us to press forward and work. Without hope, we stop working toward a better future. But with hope, with that resilient hope, it causes us to press on and to move forward. But it's also like that bird, it can be very fragile and very vulnerable. And sometimes when we get in a place and our hopes are like that bird and it's fragile. I read a story about a cancer doctor who had a patient who was so hopeful in these treatments, these state-of-the-art treatments. There's so much hope in it. It got to a place where the treatments were no longer working, and he couldn't justify sending the guy's body through that kind of torture, ultimately with no result. And the guy held on to hope the whole time. He was holding on to hope. He was making the treatments an object of his hope. And the cancer patient initially or eventually died. And this doctor was at his flower beds one time. He found a little dead cardinal, and he reflected back on. He also is familiar with Emily Dickinson's "Hope is a Thing with Feathers," and remember that hope is a thing with feathers that perches within the soul, and sings a song sings a tune without words that never stops at all. As he held that dead cardinal, he couldn't understand, but he had a revelation about the dual nature of hope. It is both resilient and it is both fragile at the same time. When your hope is fragile, that is when you need your church family. That's when you need to encourage each other. That's when you need to go to God and listen to Him, not listen to unwise counsel. That is whenever you need a renewed strength. We have this promise, and I close with this, that those who keep waiting for the Lord will renew their strength. Another version says, those who hope in the Lord will not be disappointed. Wait on the Lord, because great is His reward. But wait on Him and renew your strength. Let's pray. Father, You are more awesome than we could ever imagine. And I'm so grateful that even in spite of the times that we mess up, Lord, You still are faithful to bring about the promises, Lord, that You give us in your word. Father, I just ask that You would just move through our hearts and minds, and Lord, that You would renew hope, that You would restore vision for the future where it may have been lost. And Father, for any of us in here who may not be struggling with that right now, Lord, if we know anybody, I just pray we would take these next few minutes and we would just pray, Lord, that hope can be renewed, and that the strength to wait for Your best and hold out for Your best, Lord, will be available. And Father, I pray that You'll use us in whatever capacity You see fit to take that hope to those who are lost. But ultimately, Lord, help us to continue to wait and be patient and not cave in to doubts, and to know that Your timing is perfect and that You want what is best for us. We thank You, we love You, and praise You. In Jesus' name, amen.
beautiful, glorious, matchless in every way, wonderful, beautiful, glorious, matchless in every way, wonderful, beautiful, glorious, matchless in every way, wonderful, beautiful, we are undone. Here in your presence, heaven and earth become one. Here in your presence, all things are new. Here in your presence, everything bows before you.
What it boils down to is that waiting is hard, but God's plan is worth the wait, and He will come through. Make Him the object of your hope. See, the promises in Isaiah 49:23, those who hope in the Lord will not be disappointed. His plan for you is worth the wait. God bless you guys. Y'all have a great Sunday afternoon. It's okay. It's not big.
Thank you.